This episode is brought to you by Indie Insights. Indie Insights is our bi-weekly newsletter and love note to the film industry, movies, and the creatives that make them, not to mention you, our esteemed listeners. Inside, you'll find curated industry trends, articles, exclusive commentary, and underappreciated films from filmmakers like you worldwide. And the best part is that it is completely free. So join today at www.bonsai.film. It takes just a few seconds. And once you sign up, you'll get the very next newsletter on Friday morning. It's that simple. Go to www.bonsai.film to get Indie Insights, our bi-weekly newsletter, and join a network of film creatives just like yourself. And don't worry, we'll never sell your information or spam you with a bunch of nonsense emails, just the bi-weekly film industry goodness you need. And if you ever tire of Indie Insights, simply unsubscribe. No gimmicks, no games. So go to www.bonsai.film to get Indie Insights for free. You're listening to Make It, a podcast by Bonsai Creative that helps creatives in film get where they're going faster by sharing the advice, knowledge, and insights of professional creatives across the film industry. I'm your host, Chris Barkley, and with me today is my good friend and Make It podcast co-host, Nicholas Buggs. Hello, Chris here with another episode of the Make It podcast, and this is an Indie Talk week, and that means I'm here with my good friend and co-founder, Nicholas Buggs. Nick, say hello.
Hello. What's up, man?
Oh, gosh.
It's like, what isn't up, you know?
Well, it's been a busy week.
Yep,
we have a lot going on, and this week, personally, I'm excited about the Nashville Film Festival, and on the full disclosure, transparency, I'm on the board of the Nashville Film Festival, and we have been preparing for this week all year. And now that it's finally here, you kind of breathe a sigh of relief, but there's also a lot of pressure to make sure you don't drop any balls along the way. We've seen some great films. We've been part of some incredible panels this week, and I think that's what we want to bring to the audience today, and what we're going to try to expound upon is this idea of pitching and the various levels of it and what it means if you win a pitch contest and what you should expect to happen next, and also having the correct expectations for yourself when you go into a pitch contest, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, there's a lot to dig into.
Yeah, a ton to dig into. Topical things that are going on. There are things that are interesting around the festival world in general. And one of the nicknames and monikers I've given on Twitter, at Flaming Your Heart on Twitter, to this festival is that we want to be the Sundance of the South. Obviously, Sundance is a very prestigious film festival. One I think is incredible. I think it's always stood up for the independent filmmaker, and we've probably mentioned it a dozen times on these indie talks over the years. But I was disappointed in them this week around this story that came out in the Independent about the movie Jihad Rehab, which was directed by Meg Smaker, and it's crazy. This is a documentary about this idea of redemption for terrorists and terrorists who have spent time in Guantanamo Bay, which is probably worse than hell. And I'm not making any apologies for the experience of a terrorist.
You're just saying what it is. Yeah.
But it was a secret prison. It was a terrible place, both for the people who worked there and the people who were imprisoned. And that's why it's against the law. That's why, there had to be some reform there.
Right.
And by all accounts, this documentary was really well reviewed. Everybody loved it, including Sundance, including the documentary darling and influencer Abigail Disney. Mm-hmm. Critics all around loved it. And then the community in the Middle East, those critics got a hold of it and were really put off by it and started to criticize this idea that it's a white savior story. How can a white woman tell a story about Middle Eastern terrorists? And all of a sudden, the very respectable Sundance did an about face. All of a sudden, the movie wasn't good. All of a sudden, it didn't make their festival. And then Abigail Disney did an about face. All of a sudden, she thought it was a hate turd, a hate bomb, and she was gushing over it beforehand. And it's just disappointing to see that this is where we've come, and you can call it cancel culture, but this idea that because of the color of your skin, as an artist, you do not have permission to explore certain ideas. It rings false to me, Nick.
Yeah, I'm curious. So, full disclosure, I haven't read the full article, but as you mentioned, they did an about face, right? So did they in fact change the story, as in say that this was no longer good? Or did they shift into a position of this is no longer acceptable at our festival? This is no longer something that we're going to support because there's another community that is against the content?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think their message is both. And I think what happened after that is what is even more disturbing, because critics then encouraged people who had worked on the documentary to take their names off the credits, to not be associated with the film. They went far and wide to ensure that other festivals didn't program this documentary.
Is this like an after the fact apology? Not necessarily an apology, but like, oh, we didn't realize our level of racism or whatever it is before, but now that we're woke, right? Now that you've awakened us to whatever unintentional bias or, I don't know, savior syndrome or whatever it was that they apparently discovered that they had, that they're saying now that we realize this, it's bad, and we're acknowledging how bad it is. So anyone that we're associated with, hey, guys, we've been told by this part of the community that it's bad. Now, let's say this was, a documentary about some section of the African-American community. Do you think the same thing would have been true if black folks had come out and said, hey?
I do.
Okay.
I think that if you had black critics come out and say, hey, we're not going to support this movie, this is bullshit, whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's fragile times, man. I don't, you see the ACLU bending in a way that it's never bent before. You see these prestigious organizations like Sundance that they're unwilling to fight the moral and philosophical battles. They're too fragile. It feels like everyone is overextended and they cannot afford financially to risk people boycotting their thing, people being upset with their thing. And when you live in a world where everything is vanilla, this should not be coming for independent filmmakers. This type of reaction, this type of rule setting should not be coming for and affecting independent voices. And Sundance is all about independent voices. This director, according to The Independent, is broke. She's been ruined.
Right?
She's been ruined. And the sad thing is, imagine making something that was universally loved,
and then having that taken away from you,
and then just having it taken from you, and then your career and your financial prospects. She has no chance to sell this now, no chance to distribute it. It'll find no home. Abigail Disney is way too influential.
Oh yeah.
And I'm dumbfounded by it. I'm dumbfounded by where we've allowed ourselves to get.
Yeah, and I'm curious as to the number of these critics. How many? Is it one? Like one that was very influential? Is it 50 critics? And like basically the idea is how many people need to speak against a thing in order for cancel culture to take effect?
Yeah.
And it's scary if it's two. If
Right.
that number is two people raise their hand and say you shouldn't do this, and then the whole thing gets shut down. That's frightening. I can see if there's a movement, right? I can see if it's hundreds of thousands or if it's thousands of people are getting up to boycott this thing, but I don't think that's the case here. So how influential and how many critics are really stepping up to make such an influence? That's crazy.
There's a lot of virtue signaling these days, a lot of moral virtue signaling. And the end result of it, at least in the short run, is power and security. You saw a number of things that were very similar this week. Berkeley University, they have 9 law students or 9 law departments or something like that joined together to basically create a club that excluded anyone that was Jewish. And, again, I took to Twitter and said, hey, I gave him 3 eyeball emojis.
I was going to say.
We need to pay attention to this.
Yeah, what's going on here?
This is at a liberal, the most liberal university in the country, and they're doing anti-Semitic stuff and trying to use the Constitution, use law to sort of get their way. So not only have they pushed off speakers that might trigger someone, but now they're using loopholes to exclude people from certain clubs and groups based on whether or not they're a Jew, which is unbelievable. And then good friend of the podcast, Chris Green, who just did an amazing Mistake in the Making, was in Dahmer.
Yep.
And one of the black female crew from Dahmer had a bad experience, apparently.
Right.
Said she was treated terribly. Said she's so glad the series is out and that the work is over. She didn't have a great time.
Right.
Well, Chris saw that, who was in Dahmer, acted in it as an actor, and replied to her comment and said, we definitely do not share the same opinion, or she definitely speaks for herself.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
His experience was great.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as he did that, either the bot army or
which it could be,
right? Because we know what happened with Zack Snyder and how he got his bot army to get him a cut of God, I'm forgetting the Marvel movie he did now that he forced a recut of.
DC.
Yeah, or DC movie. Yeah, it was like a 3-hour Justice League. Yeah. It was pretty good, actually. But it turned out there were no real fans clamoring for this.
Right.
It was all bot action. So he ends up getting in basically a Twitter war over this, and all he did was simply say, "Not my experience, and I'm black."
But talk about the Twitter war. Like, who's he warring against?
There were people. The immediate response I saw under it was, "Just like a black man, to not let a black woman have her moment. Let her have her moment."
That's crazy.
And apparently, Chris Green's saying, well, she's trying to promote a short film. She's using this as a platform to bring attention to herself. And apparently these friends are like, and?
Right.
That's the whole point.
Right. So let's talk about this, though. So there's people who responded in that way. So there was this a black woman, do you know?
You don't ever know who you're talking to unless you really know them. There are a lot of my friends on Twitter that I know them because I know them.
Right.
But it's... in this case, I don't know these people. They had black profile pictures.
There you go. So that's another interesting part about that, right? So you have potentially, or let's say likely in this case, a black person saying, just like a black man too, ...
Mm-hmm. It's
like, where do you think that comment is going to take us?
Yeah. It was straw man attack after straw man attack. But
on your own community, what are you doing? Like
on your own community, and where Chris is trying to redirect the conversation back to the point, and he can't do it. Now he's caught up in the in the tide of the conversation where they've strawmanned him to death. And now, you go several comments down in this Twitter fight he had, and they're now just simply talking about how black men aren't shit and like stuff like that. Just unbelievable stuff, stereotypical stuff. It was never about that.
Stereotypical stuff from the black community.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. Other communities don't, I don't know why we do this to each other.
Exactly.
And then I'm left to wonder, are we doing this to each other?
That's what I'm saying. It's not even... Correct. But it's not even like to each other. I always say you're doing this to ourselves, right? You're doing it to yourself when you do this to someone else. But I'm with you. Isn't that crazy? Like, you don't even know if that's actually people who are saying these things now. At some point, like you said, the comment thread could have been taken over by bots.
Yeah.
And then you got people commenting back to the bots, and the bots are commenting back to the people, and it's just 2022.
Yeah. And for me, I don't engage in it. Naval Ravikant said, don't argue with idiots on Twitter. And you can always tell who an idiot is on Twitter because they're arguing with some idiot on Twitter.
Right.
So my advice to Chris Green is
don't argue
don't put yourself in that position because, you can't win. It's a bunch of people against you. I was recently in one of these things where I just simply said the honest truth, which there was this kid in a middle school or a high school, and he was being incredibly disruptive to the gym class. And instead of calling his parents, for some reason, they called the security officer, the SRO, to come handle it. He was unbelievably disrespectful to this officer and walked away from him and was cursing at him and threatening him in sort of a passive aggressive way. This is a kid. Yeah. And I just simply said, to be honest, if any of my kids were on video speaking like this, I'd be heartbroken. Maybe they should have called his mom, his dad, or his guardian instead of the SRO, and they could have handled it because he probably would not have talked that way to his own parents or guardian. Okay. And if so, then we understand what we understand. And I had 2 or 3 people that I then saw and looked at their profile. 3 followers, 10 followers, no posts, right, arguing with me, like basically saying the kid's in the right, police brutality.
Wow.
This is police brutality because he ended up getting pepper sprayed and arrested because he wouldn't just come. This officer asked him to please stand up and come with him peacefully for 10 minutes.
Yeah, but
while class is going on.
Yeah, but back to your point.
Yeah.
You weren't arguing with people or people weren't arguing with you. It was bots.
And once I didn't respond, the whole thing just died.
It stopped.
Yep. So the bot's algorithm says, based on this response, and I'll never forget that whole Microsoft experiment where they created a bot from Azure, and it took the bot only 24 hours to become misogynist, racist.
Right, yeah.
So this is the society we're in, and social media is supposed to be this great marketplace of ideas, the thing you learned about in college where the best ideas rise to the top. But I think the way social media works is actually the most entertaining thing rises to the top, not or the most outrageous thing, not the best idea. For example, the worst idea. So if you have a video of a cat misbehaving, that is seen as better as a cat purring and loving on its owner. Yeah. If you see some large woman jumping from her balcony onto a table and then breaking her back as the table breaks, right, that is higher rank than, let's say, a larger woman making a salad or exercising or taking care of herself or being empowered. Like, so it just triggers and so you do that for over a decade. And what you have is like this, and it's kind of, there's a fever pitch to this moment. And then now you have these factions, you have these things happening in different states. I don't know anybody like this in real life. I go out in real life, everybody's really nice.
Exactly, yeah.
But there are these factions that are rising, and I just want people to pay attention to what's happening, especially in the film space where it's like, here's a director. Everybody that listens to this podcast that does film knows how hard it is. They know what kind of gauntlet it is to make a movie.
It's not easy.
And she made a movie, and she didn't do it in a cheap way.
Well, she didn't do it in a vacuum.
She went there.
Right.
She flew to the Middle East. She spent PB. How long? Can you find out, producer PB? Can you find out how many months she spent in the Middle East to do this film? Well, do you see it? Do you have the article pulled up?
He can pull it up, but yeah, I think
I want to find out. But she was in. She's with the terrorists.
Well, what I'm saying, but
she didn't do it via Zoom.
But
she didn't make any guesses.
Doing it by herself either. There are other people who are within the same community of folks that are railing against it. She likely partnered with in the process of making this film.
Oh, that is so true. Because the other thing that was said in the article's lengthy, but one of the other things that was mentioned in the article is that a bunch of these naysayers said the whole thing was done by white people. So here you are telling this story, and you don't have one person of color on your entire crew. Turns out not the case. Well, had a Saudi person on the crew and had another person of color on the crew.
But here's the thing.
So you can just say whatever you want now.
I know, but even the crew, like, is that even an appropriate thing to target? Right? Mm-hmm. I mean, did they target the advisors? Probably not.
Yeah.
There's probably several advisors to that team that helped them through this process that were of the same community. So yeah, it's terrible. And that's why I look at it. It's just, again, this is just an example of cancel culture. And, at what point do these larger institutions push back?
I love what Ken Burns said. And I think if you're going to push back against powers this strong like Sundance and Abigail Disney and others, it has to be somebody like Ken Burns, because he's iconic in documentary film, and he's on the record saying we get into documentary film so that we can explore experiences outside of our own lives and communities.
100% agree. Now, how about another thought to append to that?
Okay.
There's all this concern about DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the idea that people's stories aren't being told and we're not, invited to the table. Sometimes it's nice to be brought to the table.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like you're always guaranteed a seat, right? So if someone brings you, so this director, right?
Yeah.
This director brought this conversation to the table.
Yeah.
How can you be mad at that? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they brought that cultural conversation to the table. Mm-hmm. Why does it matter what her skin color is? And that's the thing. That's just crazy to me. It's like, you guys want to harp on this and you're not doing it. But as soon as now a white person helps bring your stuff to light, you're saying you're not allowed to do that?
Yeah.
Come on. And that's why I think you're saying Sundance, come on, you got to be better than that.
Sundance is, of all places, has to be better than that.
So let's go back to where you started. So is NAF still aspiring to be the Sundance of the South? Or
I think in some ways, because one transgression doesn't make for your history and who you are.
Very good.
It would never be hypocritical in that way. I'm not perfect. You are not perfect. And I would hate to be described or branded based on one mistake, one thing I did wrong. I think this is a mistake. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be honest about it. I want to be forthright about it. I think Sundance made a mistake this time. I think they fell under and into the pressure of cancel culture or of social media or the court of public opinion. And I hope they never do it again. But that doesn't take away the years and years and years and years and years and decades of support of independent
and extremely high quality
independent film. But I hope that doesn't happen here.
Well, I think that's the point, right? That's the lesson.
I should say at National Film Festival.
And I think that's the lesson, right? It's a lesson learned, and it's like, hey, let's not fall into that trap. And being a member of the board, it's also something you can communicate. Mm-hmm. Like this, there's the potential for this to happen at any given time. So what can the board do as a collective, almost to, say this is going to be part of our mission, as NAF, to not fall into this trap, and make sure that if there is something that is truly exploitative, right, then that you actually deal with that.
Yeah.
But
But
do your work.
But
right?
if it's
do your
exploitative, don't say it's the best documentary
right.
in years.
You don't get
and then turn around and say,
"Yep, don't go back.
Right.
Don't go back on your word."
Yeah, you have to own it you have to own it once you say it and it's out there. You have to own it, and now it's just so false because they're scrambling. I was also just tickled pink because nobody's better at this than Kanye West. Like he had his runway show and he wore the White Lives Matter hoodie, and it's just he's so good at pressing buttons. And the reason why I don't like it is because I thought not that we were past it. That it just feels like that moment had already sort of like we all understood it. We all understood what that was, and we have all accepted that, Black Lives Matter. And I know how that organization is funded, so I'm not in love with that. But I do like the sentiment, which is, and the point is that, Black Lives Matter, where Black lives are the ones being harassed and killed on a regular basis, discriminated against, etc. That's why that's the phrase. The phraseology I don't like and never have because it's divisive. It doesn't bring people. It doesn't bring people together. And so it has its weaknesses. Mm-hmm. But if you wear the polar, is that unity? I guess that's the question. I was wondering to myself. He's going to get incredible attention and backlash for his brand and for himself, both positive and negative. He's willing to get publicity, regardless if it's good or bad publicity. But does the phrase "White Lives Matter" bring society together, or does it divide even further? I think Black Lives Matter is divisive. Said that all lives matter and Blue Lives Matter has been sort of hijacked by the right and seems to be divisive now.
Yeah, but I think
it seems to be as misunderstood as Colin Kaepernick's knee.
Yeah,
that he took.
I think that it's
or I'm saying Black Lives Matter to them is misunderstood as Colin Kaepernick's knee, right?
Yeah.
Like
I think
he was doing.
I think White Lives Matter is publicity. I think because of his persona, it will be perceived as such. It will be perceived as another thing that he's doing, like wearing a MAGA hat. Mm-hmm. There is no divisiveness that's going to occur from it. It's kind of like it's just Kanye being Kanye. Yeah. I will echo, your sentiment. We've talked about this before where, I don't think Black Lives Matter was the right way to go from a statement standpoint. Yeah. Primarily because it's it's an imperative. You're telling someone this, where people might not believe that. There might be parts of the country that don't believe that, and you're telling them to do something that they don't want to do, which creates division. But again, with Kanye, it's a publicity stunt. People are just going to see it being Kanye. Yeah. It might actually be very good for whatever he's trying to sell, because Kanye is still seen as one of the greatest hip hop artists of all time.
Artist, period. Yeah.
Greatest artist of all time. Still has a very big following when it comes to his, not only his music, but his clothing. And he's going to he's starting his own thing, right? His own line. So now it's like, hey, look, I've got Black folks on my side, and I've got a good population of white folks on my side already, because young white kids listen to hip hop.
Have to. You can't be successful
without them.
Yeah.
But now he's like, maybe I'm going to expand my customer base even more into the folks that would really latch on to this statement of White Lives Matter. So to me, it's like it's a business move that he learned from his ex.
Yeah, he's not always, he does bombastic things, but he's not always wrong, actually. He just isn't great at communicating the complexity and nuance of certain political and social ideas, in my opinion.
I think it's his personality.
Or he just needs more time to get the words out, because he'll give you some word salad and then he'll say something profound, right?
Yeah, it's his personality. He's just going to put it out there. And
like this Adidas stuff, and Gap stuff, I don't think he was wrong in that. I think everything I read seemed like they were basically trying to play him and like reneging on their side of the consideration of those contracts. So did he handle it like a gentleman? Did he handle it in a nice way? And did he handle it like I would have? I guess not, but I guess that's why I'm not Kanye.
I was going to say that. You're not Kanye. So he'll do what he's going to do. So with that, I think that'll, shock and awe.
Yeah.
And then next week we'll be talking about something.
Well, that's crazy too, because that's the whole thing about the reaction that these large institutions have to, films like, Meg, what's her name? Smacker. Smaker. Yeah. Meg Smaker. Yeah. Jihad Rehab. It's like, maybe somebody will be mad at you for 2 weeks and then it'll be over.
Yep. There's just too much.
Just endure. There's too much going on and we're getting it in real time. Just endure the hate for a minute and then, it's ridiculous. So let's get to the main topic though today. Let's talk about pitching, because one thing we do a lot is go to film festivals and we judge pitches. Yep. And sometimes we get to be in the audience and kind of see how these pitches work and see the responses from the panelists, research the panelists and see even, what their level of credibility is, and then try to match that up against their opinions. But the coolest thing to me, and please give me your feedback as well on this, the coolest thing to me is just to see how creative everybody is in terms, especially like the pitch finals where you're down to like the final 20 people or 10 people, the level of creativity and rehearsal and the variety of approaches to get into your pitch is remarkable. And the pitch session we saw at the film festival, Nashville Film Festival this year, was remarkable. And it made me think about the larger global audience, everybody in the world that listens to this podcast that wants to pitch a movie, pitch a film. How would they go about it? What can we bring from this experience to them to help them out?
I think the reason we wanted to talk about this, because there's actually so much to talk about. Yeah. Right. So it's basically, as you start to think about it, it's like, okay, what's the first thing to talk about? And the first thing that I think of is, with these pitch contests, I'm just curious, and this is a conversation. I don't know if there's an answer to this. Right. It's like, what is a pitch contest? Like, what are you pitching? Yeah. Right. And I asked that question almost rhetorically, but it's like, when we talk about pitching or creating a pitch package, it depends on what level of the film that you're in and to whom you're pitching. Right. So you could be pitching something to an investor. Mm-hmm. Right. And we would never say take an idea to an investor. Right. Right. The investor's not going to invest in your idea. Right. Mm-hmm. They're going to invest in, your potential to execute in order to get them a return on investment. Right. Yeah, and
execute a project.
Exactly. A specific project. It's very specific, a detailed thing. So when we go to these pitch contests or we attend them or we facilitate them, I think you got to set some ground rules about like, what is the pitch? And I think for this pitch competition, it really was, how well do you present your idea? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think that if they had, let's say, told everyone that in the beginning, then there might have been a different approach from various people. Right. Yeah. So some folks came up with a full binder of information, they printed out all this stuff when they weren't actually judged on that. Yeah. But it's good to have that. You want in a professional pitch to an investor or a distributor or a sales agent, a lawyer, whatever it is, you want to have these artifacts. But depending on the pitch contest, they may or may not help you, right? So why put all that work into those artifacts when really you need to put your work into the presentation? So that's the thing. This, to me, it's like, well, what are you pitching? And should all of the pitch contests be presentation contests? Should they be package contests? Should they be investor pitch? There's so many ways to go.
Yeah, I think we chip into that and get into the minutia there a little bit. And in doing that, I'll give you my pushback. My pushback on that is like, I think that if you're going to a pitch contest, you kind of know it's about your presentation. Mm-hmm. Okay. You kind of know that. Like, you don't have to break that out and say, is this about my presentation, or is this about my idea, or is this about my package? It's like, you're standing up in front of an audience and in front of a panel who's judging you. Everything matters. The way your haircut matters, how erect or not you stand matters. The tremble in your voice matters. The passion in you. I heard that from a multitude of panelists that, like, you didn't sound very passionate about your project, like as if they were going to go buy it.
Right.
That I will agree. It's like, as a panelist, why are you judging them on the sound of the passion of their voice when the outcome isn't that you're going to buy their story or help them make it? Like, why did they need to be passionate for you? Well, the reason why is because your overall presentation is what is being judged. And I think deep down inside, every person who pitches knows it.
Yeah, and I think that, and you say everyone knows it, and I wonder, for the folks who brought, packages, they brought stuff to hand out, unless it was, of course,
always a mistake,
a globe. But which was a very cool.
If it's, I should say, it's always a mistake if it's something to read. Yeah, like in my former life of doing 2 and 3 hour presentations at large corporations, you never wanted. Sometimes you'd be in a bake-off. You know what a bake-off is, Nick?
Yeah,
bake-off.
Yeah.
Okay, so
between you and another.
Well, usually 2 or 3 others, and you go back to back to back. Mm-hmm. And it's always great to go next to last and not last. You never want to go first. First is the sucker pick. If you go first, you lost. So you'd see somebody go and they would hand out a giant pamphlet, and it would be, they'd have slides that were filled with words.
Oh, both of those.
It's like, what are you doing? They're going to be reading that the whole time, and they're not going to see anything you have to show.
Right. Which is, by the way, one of the things that one of the panelists mentioned, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you gave us this at the beginning of your presentation, and we started reading. So which one are we supposed to do?
Yep.
I'm not sure if I'm going to watch you or read this.
Yeah,
so
you got to kiss it. Keep it simple.
There you go.
Silly.
Yeah.
Nobody's stupid
Be
that
nice.
pitches.
There you go.
Be nice. Yeah, but that's the thing. It's like, how can you convey an idea without noise? And we go back to this idea, this topic of noise that we've talked about before. Right. It's a deep concept too, because if you start to pay attention to how you communicate and how others communicate with you, or what it's like when you're trying to receive a message and what gets in the way of that, it's all around you. Mm-hmm. And trying to remove it can be difficult. You live in a house and you're watching a show and somebody's talking in the room behind you and you just can't connect with the story that you're trying to watch.
Right.
I think that's why Gen Z and millennials, I think that's why they like to watch shows on their iPad and phones and on their laptops in their room alone, because everyday life is about 4 seconds of attention all over the place. Give me your 4 seconds. Give me 4 seconds. Give me 4 seconds. And you're bouncing from screen to screen to screen to screen and social network to social network and picture to picture. And I've caught myself doing that. I'm not shitting on the generation. I've caught myself being on Instagram in particular and just sort of like an automaton scrolling up and clicking that heart.
Right.
Like, I've had to catch myself several times and say, now, why did you click that heart? You didn't even listen to the song. You didn't even hear the joke. You didn't even hear the audio. You just saw something funny and you assumed it was going to be good and you clicked like.
I like it.
And I'll stop and I'll go back and listen to it. I'm like, come on, at least consume the content.
Chris is over here giving likes for showing up.
Yeah.
Oh, you showed up today?
You showed up today?
A like.
You get a like.
You get a like. You get a like.
Look under your chair.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Everybody gets a like.
But I agree about the noise, right? That's the key. So let's bring it all back again. Okay, so what's the purpose of a pitch? You get 2 minutes, maybe 3. So it's all about your presence. It's all about
bananas.
It is bananas. It's so tight. Yeah. But it's all about your presentation. Okay, so all of the ancillary stuff that you might be bringing might be great, especially if you want to leave something with someone that you might feel as though they could be a mentor or a future investor. they've got your thing to take with them, but not to look at right there. But it really is all about the presentation. And let's just talk a little bit real quick about that noise.
Yeah.
You know, like you said earlier, you were like, you know, your presentation's all about everything. It's about the way you look, the way your hair is, the way you speak. It's about, you know, how nervous you are, demonstrating confidence. And I think at, you know, this year's Pitch Fest, we saw everything. You know, we saw, you know, folks that were just super nervous and forgot their lines, right? And he had some folks saying, hey, look, don't have lines, right? At this point in the game. I
totally agree with that piece of advice to not have lines, except I think that the winner of the contest memorized.
Yes, it was a script.
His script like he was an actor.
Yeah. Because he was an actor.
Well, he was an actor.
And he did it twice.
Yeah,
because that's how you know. You did it exactly the same 2 times.
So maybe the advice is know your limitations.
Right.
Know what you are. But more importantly, like, I've never been in front of someone as an adult presenting anything, singing anything, doing anything where I thought I didn't know the material well enough to wing it.
There you go. That's the key. And that's what the dependence on the script was, is that as soon as you lose your place, you're done. And that's what happened to some folks. They were just done, and it was sad, you know, and it creates this noise that you lost it. Because again, it is about that. It is about the conversation or the presentation. And if your presentation breaks in the middle, that's it.
It's kind of like watching somebody ride a bicycle down a street and then they look over to wave at somebody and then hit the back of a car and flip over it.
There you go. That's, but, I guess
that's kind of what it's like.
Well, it's like you
were floating right along.
I guess
you were floating right along.
I guess it depends on who it is.
Over a car.
Yeah, because you're talking about Jim Carrey, we're all going to laugh. But when we're watching the pitch competition, it's like, oh, man. That sucks, you know.
Yeah. You actually empathize. You're not laughing at them at all. You're totally empathizing with the situation, and you're rooting. I found myself in the back of the room rooting for people who lost their place. Like, come on, you got this.
Yeah,
like, come on.
Like, just get it back.
Like, but just take a deep breath.
I will say this though, that though I agree, and I'm in your space where it's like I'm rooting for them.
Under my spell.
I'm rooting for them, but at the same time,
we looked at each other a little too long right there. It was
a little weird, but at the same time, I'm a little disappointed, right? I mean, this isn't like you knew you were coming to this pitch contest, right? Okay, and then you had I don't know how much time since the day that you applied and they got in, and this is the finals.
Yeah. So
there had to have been some weeding out process, and then you get to this point and you don't know your stuff enough to wing it. Like you don't know your story, you don't know, and then you mentioned the idea of this passion. Right. So I will say that one of the folks that got up that I think was talked about, they did advise him about passion. I'll admit I felt the same way. Right. Where it was like there was it kind of felt like a teacher, was just telling us about a thing. Like this was instructional. Right. And I was just like, OK, even if what you're saying is correct, it's not interesting.
Yeah.
That's what it was for me. It's like there was no passion behind it. So I didn't get excited. I'm sure that there could have been something exciting about it, but it was so matter of fact of what it was. I think there was too little emphasis on why it was and why I should care. So I think that the passion has to be there. The confidence has to be there. And I think the practice in just knowing your stuff has to be there. And then I think you can, at least you can compete.
There is this idea that you don't have to do this job when it comes to filmmaking and creative. You get to do it. And I get stressed out. I get short with people. I can be a butthole. I can be elitist. I can be all these things. But I always can fall back and remind myself, you get to do this.
Yeah.
For at least right now, you get to have a cool podcast. You get to help film creatives get where they're going, right? Like you get to make cool things. Mm-hmm. You get to be part of films. You get to change people's lives through investment, through consultation. You get to do it through branding and marketing. Like you don't have to do it. No one's got a gun to your head.
Right.
Like you get to do it. So come to those situations with a great deal of energy and excitement about and know what you're talking. Like take the effort to know what you're talking about. Like, could you imagine that though? Like, to me, that's the toughest thing. Like you're pitching your story and you just don't know your own story.
Yeah, or you're not passionate about your story. I think it's when it comes to pitches, knowing your stuff is important, right? It's definitely important because you don't want to lose your place. You want to be able to talk through any foible that you might make.
Foible, I like that.
Oh yeah,
thank you.
My pleasure. But the other thing is
he said foible and fully each season.
Right. The other part of it is I will say that Maya Angelou's line, and if I get it wrong, please let me know. But the spirit of it, people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful.
That's what pitching is about.
Yeah.
Like if you can just stop with that, like if they would just sit with that for a moment, I think that would change the way that everyone pitches, right? So the person that came kind of with a more, instructional tone, or the person who came in and forgot their lines, or came in with the nerves and all that's like, look, you're trying to make us and the judges, the panel, feel a certain way.
Yes.
What are you doing to get the feeling that you want? Focus on that, right? Focus on that first. And then what is the content that you need to create to get to that feeling? Yeah. And I think if folks focused on that, they'd be in a much better position to be successful at pitch contests.
Agreed. Let's get into some of that tactical pitching.
Okay.
While you're at it. The first thing I will say is your opening line is just like when you write a screenplay. That first 3 pages kind of has to pop off the page. Mm-hmm. Some dramatic things have to happen. Some poignant premises have to be laid out, and some interesting characters, or at least the interesting protagonist, has to be laid out. Well, when you're pitching, you should be asking a high impact question. You should be asking a question of the audience and of the panel that makes them pause. There's something that turns them around, that reverses their thought. Most people think Japan has the highest suicide rate in the country. What if I told you they weren't even in the top 10? Mm-hmm. Okay, or I said country, I meant world.
Right.
Japan, yeah. So you say something like that, like, okay, Japan doesn't have the highest suicide rate in the world.
Well, you might not even think about that. It's like, there's another place. 10? Like, what is that place?
Yeah,
right.
What is that place? Yeah. And then now you're set up to talk about what is the number one place in the world for suicide per 100,000 capita, right? Like now you're like, okay, I'm going to learn. This is now valuable time because this person in front of me is going to teach me something. So that is an incredibly powerful tactic when you start pitching. Let's get into some real world stuff. Now at a festival, you're pitching in front of an audience and a bunch of panelists with diverse backgrounds and varied levels of success. But in the real world, your pitch wouldn't go like that at all. You would never be limited to 2 or 3 minutes. We talk about the elevator pitch. You know what an elevator pitch is? Can we just keep it real? An elevator pitch is a moment where you harass someone.
Because they're trapped.
They're trapped and they're going somewhere. They're very busy. An elevator pitch is a moment where you harassed a decision maker or a gatekeeper or someone you think is a decision maker or a gatekeeper.
Let me ask a question real quick.
So you don't want to be in an elevator pitch position anyway.
I got a question about that.
Yeah.
So this is that reality versus fiction thing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the elevator pitch is real? As in, that's the type of stuff we see in movies, right? Yeah. Where they get on the elevator. It's who's on the elevator? The executive gets on the elevator first. Mm-hmm. And then the pitch person runs in from the street, right? Yeah. And they squeeze in just before the elevator closes.
Just before it closes. Always just before it closes.
Right? And then somehow they say, I'm on this person, I'm that person, and I got this thing. And then the executive says, what? You've got 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
it, right?
You've got 2 minutes.
Exactly. It's like that.
Or worse, you've got 30 seconds.
Exactly, because I'm going. No, it's usually a little bit longer. Because why? Because the executive's going to the top floor and people got to get up.
Or a good writer might write, you've gotten to the 20th floor.
Exactly. Right. So that's what they've got. But is that real? That really happened? Or is that just a movie thing and we just adopted it from there? I'm just being real.
I don't even know if people are going back to the office to get on the elevator right
Not now.
So there's
you don't get the pitch.
Yeah, I really don't even know if that's a thing.
You can't slide into somebody's Zoom. You know, you can't just walk in. You got to be invited.
Right.
But anyway, I was just trying to figure out if that's even a real thing. But anyway,
if you get lucky enough to do an elevator pitch and you get 15 seconds to 1 minute to say something, I wouldn't even pitch your idea. I would say something that would shock and awe them and just get them to stop, so they would give you 2 extra minutes.
Right.
That might be more effective. But in the real world, you're going to have a writing sample. You're going to have materials and artifacts for your idea. Yep. And those artifacts and materials are going to be hopefully good enough to get you a legitimate pitch meeting. Right. And if you're pitching to a production company or a streamer, they're going to give you time to sort of flesh out your idea, and they're going to make a decision on the spot whether or not. And I know that people say, well, they don't make a decision. No, they do. Even if they say, we'll think about it or we'll get back with you. We'll get back with you is no.
Right.
A lot of times. Let's do another meeting is not a no. It's let's get some other people in the room that I think there's somebody I want to bring to the meeting next time that might like it. Right. So you're going to have that meeting. That's a different pitch altogether. That's a pitch where you should have something to hand out.
Agreed. Yeah.
And you can actually stand up and you can direct them to a page in the deck, or you can even have
point to a PowerPoint presentation.
Point to a PowerPoint. You can bring props. We did have someone bring snow globes to the pitch session we saw, which was very cool. So you can do things like that, whatever gets your story across. And it's very, very similar to screenwriting in the sense of there are a lot of people that harp on spec screenwriting rules and rules around formatting. And the real hard truth is if your story is amazing, it doesn't need a format.
Yeah.
Like story is king in every artistic medium you can think of. And if you have it, you have it. And it'll come through. I always tell a story about Mary J. Blige getting her record deal. She had just like a self-tape recording of her like singing with this terrible sonic quality, but on the other end of that was Mary J. Blige. So it didn't matter
right.
that. And then you have people that go out and spend $5,000 on 3-song demos, and it's not.
And you listen to the first.
And you listen to the first. You listen to the first 5 seconds, and you don't like it. So we talked to a cool creative named Birdie. I can't remember Birdie's last name. But
Wilson.
Birdie Wilson this weekend, and she's got a little EP coming out in November, of this year. But I was talking to her about the poles of great and bad.
Yep.
And great and bad both get engagement. Mm-hmm. And if you don't get a lot of engagement, that means you're somewhere between bad and great. And that doesn't mean you should quit. A lot of people quit because they don't get engagement on a thing. That just means you just need to sharpen it a little better, because you're either going to find out if you're bad or you can be great. But the point I was making to her is no one has to tell you that something's bad. If you have a glass of Kool-Aid and it's made with salt instead of sugar, you just spit it in the sink immediately. Like you don't swish it around.
You're done with it. Right.
Like you don't swish it around and consider it. No, maybe.
Right.
No, you spit it out. And when you have a slice of deep dish Chicago pizza, it's delicious right away. You don't need to be told that it's delicious. You don't need to get the opinions of the person next to you. What do you think about this? Is this good? No, you know whether it's good or you know whether it's great or not. And so when you come into a pitch room like that, they're going to know if it's great or not, and they're going to be interested right away. And if they're not, just keep working on it.
Yeah. Now, so you said something earlier, though. I want to kind of get back to. So you mentioned the idea, and I think it works, in either the pitch room or the pitch contest, which is this idea of having a question, right, or some line. So I think I would say that in addition to that, or as an alternative to that, I think another thing that works really well is world building.
Yeah.
Right. So if you can create a world that we can envision that is of interest, that is a wonderful thing. So I think the guy, I think actually both folks, right? So the one that won the episodic as well as the one that won the feature did that very well, right? I think you could sense, potential holes in either of their overall pitches or their approaches. But what they did better than anyone else, right, was build a world that we could all envision.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I think about, that Maya Angelou quote about how you're feeling, I think when it comes to film is that you want them to feel the world that you're building.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's like,
exactly.
I can see it. I can smell it. I can taste it. I can feel, in one of the pitches, it was about racial tensions.
Yeah.
You could feel that.
Yeah.
You could feel that. And the other one was more whimsical fantasy, fairyland type things. I could sense that. Right. And that's the feeling that I think they left with the panelists, which is why those were the most memorable. And I think there was another pitch. There was actually another pitch about zombies. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that would have been one of the top. Right. Because everyone can see that world. Now, if I were to think back to all of the other pitches, I'm having a hard time.
I have a hard time even remembering
the
them.
worlds.
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
because it's not a character, it's the world that's being built. So if you can build a world that people can envision themselves in, the next step is to build the characters or to explain the characters that are in that world.
Yeah.
And I think if you can do that successfully, then you've got, some of the foundation to a winning pitch, either in a contest or in the pitch room.
Yeah, I completely agree. And we'll wrap on this concept too. Having invested in a few films ourselves, a pitch to an investor is also unique as a pitch versus pitching in a festival.
Oh, 100%.
So when you pitch in a festival, again, you're pitching to a panel of diverse people and everybody has to like it. It's actually a really interesting challenge. Like, how do I tell a story? How do I build a world that a writer, a producer,
a brand strategist,
and whoever's on the panel will all like equally.
Right.
That's really hard. And when you win that, it's because you were a great storyteller. You basically could spin a yarn. Is that how it goes, PB? Is that the phrase?
That's
spin
the
a yarn.
phrase.
By the way, how long did she spin in the Middle East?
Well, it doesn't say exactly, but what she did, she's a former firefighter. She, shortly after 9/11 in 2001, moved to Yemen and then later Saudi Arabia. The film didn't get completed until 2021. So she's been in that community for a long time.
Confirmed. The director of Jihad Rehab is the real deal. Anyway, back to this. But you're having to tell the story, get a lot of people to like it, and then you win. But with an investor, you ought to know exactly who you're talking to. So if you're doing a pitch because you're trying to raise funds and financing for your film, please don't be generic when you go to your investor. I know for me and Nick, we both have our antenna and our radar way up.
Yep.
When somebody makes us feel like we're just a walking paycheck.
Exactly.
Like if all you want from me is money, I'm not your guy. Why? Because I know that you'll go to the next person who writes a bigger check, and then all of a sudden they're your favorite person.
Right.
And they get all the compliments you just gave me. And that's bullshit. Yeah. I don't want that. I want to know that you are pitching to me because you want me and Nick in your project.
Exactly. As part of your lives for the next 2 to 5 years. That's how long these things take. So you're creating partnerships here. You're creating alliances here. You're not just looking for someone's money. If that's what you're after, then you get found out. Yeah,
I don't want to. I don't want to play a monetary arms race with some other investor I don't know.
Yep.
Right. That's not cool. And so you're going to research that, and you would adjust your pitch according to the person you're talking to. You would never pitch one investor the same way you would pitch another. So that's how it gets a little different.
In the real world.
You're being very specific. And same thing with certain production houses, but that's common knowledge. You're not going to pitch a drama to Blumhouse, right? Like you're going to pitch a horror film.
Right.
So know your audience, know who you're pitching to, but then also when you're doing a raise specifically, adjust your pitch to fit the why of the investor. Like, why me? Why do you want me to invest? And if you nail that, it's your chances skyrocket of getting some money or some support, and at the very least, some advice on how to get some money and some support.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I think of the things that have touched my life personally, things I've been affected by. If somebody were to make a movie about those things, I'd be all ears, because now it would be bigger than the money.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
No, man, I completely agree. And I think we touched on a couple of things. The idea of having that one opening question, right, that invites people to think or to be engaged. The other part is world building, right? If you can build that world, and I think that that's the way that you get a variety of panelists, to really be interested, because they can all envision themselves. It doesn't matter what background you come from. You can envision yourself in that world. And that gets back to what you said before about being a good storyteller. And then if you translate that out into the real world, yeah, you're going to take those elements that I think can go in the pitch and in the real world and combine that with the idea that you need to be specific. You need to understand who you're pitching to, and then making sure that you do your research on those folks. And I think that's I think right there, that's some good advice for folks doing pitching. I think there's other things that we could get into, but that's quality stuff, man. I like it.
Look at you.
Hey, that's what we do.
Look at you. That was perfectly said. I would just simply add to it, have a high impact question to start your pitch. What is a high impact question? A high impact question is a type of open-ended question that requires the listener to think deeply about what the answer could be.
Could be.
Right. So this is a good one.
Yeah, man.
We covered a lot of bases. We're trying to save the world one podcast at a time.
You got it.
Trying to help indie filmmakers, one episode, one conversation at a time. And here's another one I enjoyed. By the way, before we wrap, you've probably heard me and seen me sipping on this deep, deep red wine right here. This is the Marquez de Colbert 2016.
Let me see this thing. Let me see this thing.
Spain.
Let me see. You gotta bring it over here.
Look at that. Aged for a minimum of 12 months in oak cask. And as I always say, if you have the means, I do recommend it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
So good. No, I'm just kidding. This is... did I drink this whole thing? No, I did not. I did not drink the whole bottle. But yeah, I recommend it. There's a little...
He didn't drink the whole bottle because there's like a little bit in the bottom.
There's still a little bit left. Hear that little?
We call that a skosh, maybe a smidge.
A little smidge.
A smidge.
Very, very tasty. Mm-hmm. And I've enjoyed this. This was a tasty time. I hope the audience did too. I hope the audience got something out of it.
I think so.
We're headed to other festivals this month. Fayetteville coming up. Headed to New York in a week. It's going to be a great time. And we'll have more stories and more advice from that, and more tools and tactics to help you engineer your filmmaking game to its highest level. If you want to know more about that before we get back on the mic, you can do that very simply. Very simply.
Well, tell us how, my friend.
Okay. www.bonsai.film. That's how.
Got it. That's easy.
You can go there, learn everything about the Make It podcast, everything about our podcast series, which we have titled Voice of the Filmmaker. It's a wonderful multimedia program that has that encompasses all of our podcast series, designed to empower you, the independent film creative. And there is also a 501c3 component to it. You can donate to this thing and give back to filmmakers that need this funding. You can give back to this multimedia project that is designed to empower other filmmakers. So you can get the solution and be part of the solution all at the same time. Also, our bi-weekly newsletter, sweeping the country.
No, it is.
We've got a ton of great feedback on that every time it drops. Kudos to the team here at Bonsai that does that, along with me and Nick. You can subscribe. It's easy. You just go to bonsai.film/subscribe, and you'll be presented with a chance to put your email in. And look, we don't do anything with it. We're not some multinational corporation that's dealing your information clandestinely, behind your back.
No, it's all goodness.
No, we're not going to spam you to death. We don't even have a store up right now, so we're not going to hit you with a bunch of merch until later, when we will. But for now, we're not going to. And if you want to unsubscribe, you don't like the newsletter, you can always do that in a click. So no problems whatsoever. But we think you're going to love it. Everybody's loved it so far. A lot of great insights and things you can't find anywhere else in film. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Flame in Your Heart, or you can just search for Christopher Barkley. I'm right there. That's how I like to be contacted. If you have questions for Nick at bonsai.film. Super easy email. If you have questions for the entire Make It podcast team, including producer Papa Bear over here, you can email us at contact@bonsai.film.
Hey, you said go for it.
We don't even eat spam.
Oh, look at that. But unless it's spam would be, I'll be on it.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, you said any questions, you could send them to Nick at Bonsai. I take compliments too, man.
Oh,
I like those.
Questions or compliments.
Yeah, I like those.
Questions or compliments.
No
or
complaints.
Nudes.
No,
not nudes.
No.
Oh, do not
right.
send nudes to Nick at bonsai.film.
No. This is questions or compliments. Go to Nick at bonsai.film. I'm just going to underscore that. I'm going to put an exclamation mark at the end. Thank you very much.
I was going to say your nude pets.
No.
But you can send those nude pet pictures to our DMs on _ Bonsai Creative.
Camera one. Camera two.
And on Instagram and on Twitter. And you can search for us on TikTok, Facebook at Bonsai Creative. Mm-hmm. And we'll get right back to you. So with that, Nick, can you please leave us with the credo?
Of course, to our friends, family, filmmakers out there, be better, be creative, and be engaged.
And thank you for listening. Nick, do this again soon?
Yes, sir, we will.
All right.
Hey, it's like, I'm going to say peace, but you're like right there. So this is it. We end the podcast. I love it. This is cool.
All right. Arrivederci.
Yeah. Later, dude.
Later. # make it.
Yeah.
Hey gang, one more thing before you go. I want to talk to you about Indie Insights. Indie Insights is our bi-weekly newsletter and love note to the film industry, movies, and the creatives that make them, not to mention you, our esteemed listeners. Inside, you'll find curated industry trends, articles, exclusive commentary, and underappreciated films from filmmakers like you worldwide. And the best part is that it's completely free. So join today at www.bonsai.film. It just takes a few seconds, and once you sign up, you'll get the very next newsletter. It's that simple. Go to www.bonsai.film to get Indie Insights, our bi-weekly newsletter, and join a network of film creatives like yourself. And don't worry, we'll never sell your information or spam you with a bunch of nonsense emails, just the bi-weekly film industry goodness you need. And if you ever tire of Indie Insights, we hope not, but if you do, simply unsubscribe. No gimmicks, no games. So, one more time, go to www.bonsai.film to get Indie Insights for free. And thank you for listening.